Good morning. I'm LeeAnn Nay. I'm one of the primary counselors here at Cirque Lodge, and I'm going to talk to you this morning about why, as family members, we need our own recovery. I'm an old Al-Anon girl. I started going to Al-Anon in 1989, so I really believe in this program for the family members because we do call this a family disease. So Dave Beck talked to you about the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and although it is the foundation of everything, us codependents, family members, tend to read the Big Book and still stay focused on the alcoholic or addict in our lives. So this is a book written from the Al-Anon perspective. It's written from the family's perspective, where the Big Book is written from the alcoholic's perspective. So in 1995, they had many, many requests for a book that spoke more in depth about how to work our own steps and the traditions of Al-Anon and the concepts of Al-Anon. And so that 12-step program. I know that many of you feel that you've been greatly affected by addiction in your lives, maybe even from childhood. And so we need our own program of recovery. Dave talks about how this disease takes out our loved ones. It can be a terminal disease. Well, codependency takes a great toll on us, and I'm sure many of you would talk about many ways that you've been stressed by living with this disease of alcoholism, the behaviors that impact us so greatly. Have you been impacted with your health? Or you tend to isolate because you don't want to be around other people, and somebody asks you, oh, how's your kid doing? And you don't really want to say, oh, hey, they're in Utah on vacation. But so we tend to isolate. We don't want to talk to people. Sometimes we're embarrassed. There's financial stress. Sometimes there's even emotional and intellectual or physical abuse from the behaviors of this disease. So early on in the days of AA, everybody went to the meetings, the family included. But it wasn't long after that that the family members realized they needed their own forum to talk to one another about their fears, their resentments. What if they relapse? And the alcoholics realized they needed a group that they could just talk with other alcoholics and not have to have the family there. They could maybe be a little bit more open and honest and not worry about how they were affecting their loved ones. So Al-Anon officially got started 10 years after AA was officially started. So in about 1949 were the first real Al-Anon meetings. And I can tell you that working the steps of Al-Anon has changed my life. The traditions that we're going to talk about in depth today have helped all of my relationships be much better, even not just with the alcoholic or addict in my life. So I'm going to implore you to know that you need to do your own work. This isn't a program of do as I say, not as I do. This is a program do as I do, and I hope you will too. And when you get peace and serenity, it's palpable, and people want that. And when you go to an Al-Anon meeting, there's a phrase in there, one of the pamphlets, that says, you will know peace and serenity whether the alcoholic is still drinking or not. And I think the newcomer looks at me like, are you crazy? How can I have peace and serenity when my loved one is still suffering? Well, it is possible because I learned to detach from the chaos and drama. And we're going to talk about that too today. How do I detach and still love this person? How do I detach from the chaos and drama of addiction? And it is possible. You know, we call this a family disease. There's an old tale that says, if you take a young tree out of a forest of diseased trees, you take that young sapling tree, you replant it in a healthy place, you feed it, you water it, you nurture it, and it's growing in a really healthy way. What happens if I dig that little sapling up and I plant it right back where I took it from? And nothing has changed. That tree isn't going to be healthy. So while your loved ones are here getting excellent help 24 hours a day, y'all are at home trying to figure out, how do you live? How do you move forward? How do you learn to trust again? And that's where this program of addiction for us family members is so crucial. I don't want to come back into the same environment because as that old saying is, nothing changes, everything stays the same. So we look at what we contribute to this family. Again, we'll talk about that this morning. What do we contribute? Worry and fear, criticism? Or do we want to contribute hope, understanding, and healthy boundaries? I had to learn how to do those things. I didn't know how to do those things. Everything I thought I was doing to help really wasn't helping my loved one. It was doing a lot of enabling. So I'm so glad that you're here with us this morning, and I'm excited for you, for your own journey of recovery. Again, I just can't imagine my life without my own recovery. When I started Al-Anon, I was in a relationship with an alcoholic and addict, and after 3 years, I finally went to Al-Anon, was introduced to that program, and realized I was powerless over what my loved one did, even though I thought I could make him change. I tried everything, and it didn't work. And when I finally accepted that my life was really unmanageable, I think I loved my loved one, the alcoholic in my life, more unconditionally than ever before, but realized I can't force someone to change no matter what I try, and I felt pretty crazy. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story as we go through this morning. We're going to talk until about 11 o'clock, and then we'll take a 15-minute break, okay? So let's start by talking about where we begin on this journey. So if you were here in the studio, I would have you line up. If we visualize a line on the floor here. If you believe that addiction is a disease that needs to be treated, you'd be down on this end. Maybe you're in the middle and think, well, it might be a disease, but it's still a choice. You might be more in the middle. If you think it's just a choice and you should be able to quit if you tried hard enough, you might be on that end of the spectrum. Where do you think you'd be on this morning? Now, we're not here to convince anybody that this is a disease, but I don't believe in excuses. I do believe in explanations. And the disease model really does explain how the brain is so affected by chemicals. Some of you have said to your loved ones, what were you thinking? And in reality, they weren't thinking with a clear brain, because that's the organ that is greatly affected by alcoholism and addiction. So you'll learn more about that in the lecture this afternoon. But we also look at why would anybody make the choice to destroy their lives, their relationships, their jobs, their freedom, their insanity. And I think those are made because we're under the influence of chemicals that really impact our ability to think logically and make those healthy decisions. Now, yes, your loved ones do have to start making some different choices, but they do that when they get through here and have a brain that's no longer in such a fog from drugs or alcohol. Then we learn how to use our intellect to make healthier decisions. It is a choice to treat your disease. You do have to make the choices to treat this disease, and that's what we work on here, is how do I make those choices? What coping skills do I need so that I can make healthier choices in my life? So we start with, where do we begin? So again, where do you stand on the concept of addiction? A very simple description of disease is a condition with predictable signs and symptoms and a morbid process. Well, addiction has a morbid process in every area of our lives. Relationship-wise, career, health, spirit, our intellect, our finances, every area of our life. It has a morbid process, meaning a very negative process. And we know it's progressive, as is our codependency as family members. We can just get worse and worse. And sometimes it's hard as a codependent because I don't have alcohol or drugs to give up. I thought, well, I have to give up on loving someone. Well, that's really hard. And if it's your child, a family member, how do you give up on loving someone? Well, I realized that I don't give up on loving someone. I give up on trying to control, and I give up on living in chaos and drama, and I learn new ways. We are at higher risk for stress-related illness, just living with addiction in our lives. So Again, do you believe it can be put in remission? Do you believe it's a choice? You can just quit? Or are you somewhere in between? And again, we're not judging where you sit with this. And some of you might have been on the choice end and now have come to understand that this is a chronic, progressive, and sometimes terminal disease. Do we want to add guilt and shame to our loved ones for what they've been through? What do I want to contribute? If I say, you were just making bad choices, you just need to get a job, you just need to keep busy. What we know today is that survival does not trump punishment. In fact, when we're critical to our loved ones, we actually go against the healing process of changing how we think. Whether the addict comes in and openly admits how much shame and guilt they've got, we know it's there, and eventually it does come out. I don't want to shame and guilt my loved one, and it's not going to help them get better. But I do need to hold healthy boundaries. When someone gets to the point where they're using to survive, other things go out the window. It's not about whether they love us enough or what they're putting at risk. All they know is that they have to use or drink something in order to get through that moment of survival. Opiate withdrawal is horrible. You feel like you've got the worst flu you've ever had in your life, but you can live through it. The most deadly detoxes are from alcohol or benzodiazepines, and so that's why we need a medically supervised detoxification program for loved ones. But you wonder, why do they put everything at risk? Well, survival is the point with addiction that you get to where you have to use in order to survive. I felt like I had to do things for my loved ones because what kind of mother am I if I don't rescue my kids? I felt like I had to do the things I was doing for my loved ones or this relationship wouldn't survive. So we get into our own survival mechanisms as well. Somebody might start out with just experimenting. The vast majority of you have had a drink or maybe smoked a joint or taken a prescribed pain pill, but nobody starts out thinking, I'm going to be addicted to this. Right? Everybody thinks, I can have a beer or I can have a glass of wine with dinner. I don't think anybody's going to say, yeah, I want to be an addict when I grow up. So we start out with experimenting, and eventually we get to the point where you're avoiding withdrawal, and that's where you're using, and it's not fun anymore. Some of you may have tried to quit smoking, and I ask our audiences often, how many times did it take? It's pretty rare that somebody can quit smoking on the first try, because that withdrawal gets you back into that, I want to feel better. And so that's what the residents need to do. Some of your residents have gone through detox, but there's so much more to working this program than just getting sober. So we'll talk about that. So I talked about the most deadly chemicals from which to detox. Some people try to self-detox with alcohol. I know there's been some controversy about having alcohol stores and alcohol available during this time of coronavirus as an essential. Well, we don't want people going through withdrawal. It could be deadly, and it is essential for many people that they drink until they can get into a medically supervised situation, which we hope they do. But for some people, it is survival at that point. So our goal for this week is to speak the truth kindly. I'm going to ask you to think about why that is so important. As this picture shows, if I'm yelling and trying to convince somebody, they just put their fingers in their ears. They don't want to hear. Why do we speak the truth kindly? For several reasons. I don't want to add guilt and shame. It's not how I want to behave. And when we work these 12 steps, they're the same for us as family members. We take an inventory, and if I'm wrong, we promptly admit it. And how do I want to treat a person who's ill? I also, if I approach this person that I love in a more loving manner and a respectful manner, I may get a more receptive audience. If I come to you and I'm pointing and you know, we automatically get our guard up and we don't want to hear what they have to say. The other thing is that your residents are here and they are getting clean and sober. Their mind is much more clear and they can actually hear what you have to say. You may have said things many times already and say, well, I've already said I've told him how I've been affected, but now they may be able to really listen. So how I approach someone is going to make a difference. And I can only take that inventory of how I approach someone because I do set the stage. If I'm critical and I'm mean and argumentative and defensive, that's probably what I'm going to get back. So I want to approach someone in a loving manner and maybe have them listen a little bit better. I don't want to add to their guilt and shame. Criticism and shaming actually go against the healing process of the brain. The residents have these automatic pathways in the brain that go to all that negative self-talk. I'll never amount to anything. I'll never be able to do this. So many of them have had trauma and many things happen in their life that their self-esteem and their self-respect is really lacking. So it doesn't help when I'm critical. What I can do is come from a nurturing parent voice that says, yes, I know that there have been mistakes, but I believe that we can work through them, instead of that critical parent voice. And so we actually create more neurotransmitters in the brain for positive thinking. Hey, somebody believes in me. They think I can do this. Maybe I can. Maybe I really am worthy of recovery. Maybe I really am worthy of having those things Dave talked about, a family, a good career. Maybe I can put my past behind me. So we want to support that brain health in the way that we talk to someone. It actually increases their risk of relapse if we continue to be critical. So how do I want to support someone in that healing process? And it takes quite a bit of time. And one of the things I tell the residents is it's going to take a long time for you all to start trusting the residents that they really are invested and they're going to make some major changes in their lives. They know that they can't just be perfect for a month and you're going to start to trust them again. But when we bring into this relationship, you're going to relapse, you're going to relapse, you're going to relapse. Is that what I want to contribute? Do I want to contribute hope and more compassion? We take our own inventory. There's only one word in the 12 steps that's different for Al-Anon than it is for the alcoholic, and that's in step 12, where it says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we carry this message to others and practice these principles in all of our affairs. Where in the Al-Anon, at the AA version, it says we carry this message to alcoholics. That's the only word that's different. So in step 4, we take a thorough inventory. How am I treating someone else? Okay. More reasons for speaking the truth kindly. Residents don't always remember the details of their use, the impact of it, or the events. They might be blacked out or high and don't remember. So this week you're going to have an opportunity in the process groups and in counseling sessions. Your resident's going to ask you, how's my addiction affected you? This is your chance to tell them those situations that have been really hurtful for you or scary for you, and doing it in a kind, open, respectful manner, but with honesty, because they may not remember. Worked with a 16-year-old girl who had to tell her mother how she was in a blackout. They were so concerned for her that they called the ambulance. The 16-year-old is watching her mother being taken away. The fire trucks are there, the ambulances and the police are there, and she's so embarrassed. The whole neighborhood is standing around watching. Mom doesn't remember a thing. Mom was blacked out, drunk, passed out. All she knows is that she woke up in the hospital. So to listen, we're not here to shame and guilt, but number one on everyone's treatment plan here is to become aware of the subtle as well as the obvious consequences of our substance use disorder. They know the major consequences already, but they learn a lot of the subtleties from you. So please, at the end of the week, don't say, oh, I wish I would have brought that up, or I wish we would have talked about that. This is the chance to get things out in the open and really be honest about how you've been impacted. One young man had to listen to his sister tell him that her marriage was on the rocks because of his addiction, and how the family was going to go about treating him and involving him. And he had no idea that his sister's marriage was having so much stress because of his addiction. So we need to become aware, because this disease affects every area of our lives. We can't be in denial any longer. You all can't be in denial any longer. I was in denial a long time about how serious the problems were. We need to come out of our own denial. Sometimes the residents will tell a family member who tries to make excuses or minimizes for them. I heard one young fellow say, Mom, I really do have a serious problem. You've got to acknowledge I am an alcoholic and I need this treatment. So they may not remember the details. One of the things I've learned in Al-Anon is I get to say it once and then I let it go. After that, it's about my control issues and my fear talking, that I have to convince you and make sure that you heard what I had to say, and it can drive the other person crazy. So as a codependent, I think, well, I love you, and therefore I should be able to tell you how you're supposed to live, and then you'll be happy, right? So I'm justified. But it doesn't, it's detrimental, it doesn't work that way. But I say how I feel, I use those I messages, I'm concerned, here's why, and then I have to let it go. Because after that, we just call it nagging, and it's not helpful to the relationship. And you just get frustrated when they don't do it anyway. But we, here at CIRC, we really focus on using those I feel messages. And that's what, as family members, we need to do too. Instead of pointing the you finger, it's I feel scared, I feel worried, I don't sleep, I don't eat, I overeat. You know, we're at risk for developing our own compulsive behaviors because of the stress of this disease. Do some of you shop too much? Or do we overeat or undereat? You know, do we go use chemicals ourselves because we're depressed or we're anxious? We're at high risk for developing chemical dependency ourselves to deal with all the stress of this disease. I thought, well, if you can't beat them, join them, so I started using with my boyfriend. Not a great idea. Not a good idea at all. So, but at least I knew where he was. Sorry. Again, we want to break through the denial. This disease thrives in secrecy. How many of you have kept secrets for your loved ones? Oh, don't tell Grandma, she'll have a heart attack, she'll just die, right? Don't tell Dad. And the addicts have their own secrets. They have to get honest about them too. So it's the time to get open, honest, and willing. As Dave said, we have to be willing to change our old patterns and say, I love you, but no, I won't keep your secrets for you. If any of you are siblings listening to this today, sometimes siblings know a lot more than the parents do. And oftentimes we're coerced into keeping their secrets. And it's not healthy for the whole family dynamic. Again, this disease thrives in secrecy, and we need to be open and honest. Are you willing to say, I'm sorry, I love you, but I will not keep your secrets any longer? Okay. Have you had your own denial? Do you think it's just a phase? Oh, it's not that bad. Oh, every high school kid does that. Well, that's just what they do in college. Well, not everybody does that, and not everybody drinks to blackout. And there's a reason why hazing is illegal in most places, because kids were drinking themselves to death. So if you've ever tasted a chocolate cake, or I'll ask you, what's your very favorite food? Did you have to eat it multiple times to know you really loved it? Did you have to keep experimenting? What about something that you really can't stand to eat? Did you have to keep eating it to see that you really don't like it? Experimentation is a very short period of time. And then they learn, hey, I like this. And then they learn, and we learn from what we do, hey, this makes me feel better. I feel more in control, or I don't have to deal with my emotions. And so We have to break through our own denial sometimes. This isn't just a phase. The people who get here to Cirque Lodge have a serious problem, or they wouldn't qualify for being here. As staff, we need to know if there are other addictive or unhealthy behaviors going on with your loved one. I don't know who could lie to this face, but they do. They don't tell me everything. So sometimes from you, we need to hear, are there other addictive behaviors such as pornography or gaming or shopping or eating disorders? Other drugs that they're not telling us about? Is there some obsessive compulsive behavior? They may not be telling us these things. Is there suicidality in your family? Have they thought about suicide or attempted suicide before? We need to know this information that the resident may not be telling us. It's kind of a generational pattern that we often don't talk about mental illness in our families. Hey, grandma was in and out of the psychiatric unit her whole life. Or grandpa was a raging alcoholic. Maybe we just don't talk about those things. We need to know the genetic components of your loved one so that we can treat the whole person, not just one part. Maybe that's the drinking part. Is there a history of bipolar disorder in your family? Is there a history of schizophrenia, anxiety, depression? Because many of those things are genetic and go from generation to the next. Sometimes alcoholism and addiction will skip a generation. And we need to know those things. We need to know the mental health history in your family. Again, we want to take a very holistic approach to your loved one's care so that we can address all of those issues and not miss a very crucial part that could really increase their relapse risk if we don't deal with the depression. Have they been abused? Have they had abuse in their past? We need to work through those traumas that they may be self-medicating. So please let us know if there's anything that you are aware of, mental health-wise, addictive-wise, cousins, uncles, aunts. How does addiction show up in your family? Now, we're not here to identify any of you family members as an alcoholic or addict, but as you go through this week, you might say, wow, maybe I meet some of those issues. And so if you do feel like that you could use some help, please contact us and we will steer you in the right direction. But our focus here is on the resident that's here. But if we can be of service to you in any way as well, we know a lot of facilities across the country and sometimes in other countries as well to guide you to get help in your area. 80% of men do not get diagnosed who have eating disorders. So please, if you see things, rituals around food or that they're not eating, overeating, please let us know these things. Again, we need to know their mental health history. So some of you have dealt with those threats or actual attempts for suicide. What do you do? What did you do? There's a young man here, a former resident, whose partner threatened to kill himself. So this young man did call 911, but he went outside and waited for the ambulance to come. And in the meantime, his partner had hung himself in the house. And now he's brain dead. And this young man lives with that every day. What you don't want to do is have to say, I didn't call 911. So here's how I suggest you deal with this. If your loved one says they have intention to harm themselves, you say, are you willing to go get help? You've told me you're going to harm yourself. If they say, no, I was just kidding, I'm just trying to get attention, again you say, you have threatened to harm yourself, and if you won't go for help, I will call for you. The last thing you want to do is say, I didn't call for help. I know a lady that has kept her bag packed 24 hours a day for years now, because she has flown all over the world. When her alcoholic son calls her and is suicidal, she flies to wherever he is, and she thinks that she can save his life. And I rue the day that she doesn't get there in time. She would not admit that she was powerless over his addiction, and her life was so stressful just waiting for that call 24/7. That's just a stressful, horrible way to live. So we have a legal as well as an ethical obligation. If someone threatens to harm themselves, please get them help. Again, sometimes families just say they've paid for this over and over and over again. And that can be a real stressor. So if that is the condition in your situation, please talk to your counselors here and let us know and let us see how we can help you with that. Because suicide is a real issue. With gambling addicts, actually, they have double the suicide rate that alcoholics do because they feel like the only way to get out of the chaos and the financial ruin of gambling is to go gamble again. And they get so distressed and so depressed that suicide is a real factor. Us as family members, we are more prone to homicide and suicide because living with this disease is extremely stressful. So please get the help for you and your loved ones. The word rehabilitation. So if your arm is broken, and before it was broken you could lift it this high, you want to go to rehab after you get that cast off and be able to do that again. Well, the word habilitation means to go beyond the functioning that you had before. I can lift my arm clear up to here. I think of my husband's grandmother who could only lift her arm this high. I remember that. What we do here at Cirque Lodge is habilitate. We want to go beyond the functioning that the resident was doing before they were here and even in their healthy times. The same is true for the family. We need to not go back to the functioning we were before and rehabilitate. We need to habilitate, which goes beyond the functioning that we were before recovery. So I think the best part of my job is seeing families move beyond the dysregulation and all the dysfunction that you've had in your families. And let's face it, everybody has some. Nobody's a fully, completely exceptional, functional family, but it's a matter of scale again about how dysfunctional we are. And I see families have better communication, more trust, more fun, more love that's healthy than ever before with recovery. The traditions have helped me have a relationship with some difficult family members. And I'm so grateful for that. It wouldn't have happened before. So with recovery, we can go far beyond where we were before. Enabling, a big topic. When I say enabling, what do you think? And how have you enabled? So we talk about the unwitting process of not allowing another person to suffer the natural consequences of their actions. All enabling starts out with love, care, and concern. I know that there's not one of you out there in the audience today that knowingly would cause harm to your loved one. And yet enabling does. Some people just have enough enablers to just keep them above water that they don't crash and burn. So we figure out what is the difference between helping and enabling. Have you enabled? And what's the emotion underneath it? For me, it was fear. If I don't help, what will they do? So my son calls me at 2 in the morning years ago and said, "Mom, I haven't eaten for 3 days. I'm devastated." So what do? This is back before internet and all that. So I'm out at 3 in the morning trying to Western Union my baby, who's 20 years old, a bus ticket to get home so that I can feed my kiddo. I didn't have recovery in me at the time. I didn't know how to say, "Sweetie, I love you. Can you get to a soup kitchen? And if you'd like to come home, we'll go to treatment. I'll get you into a good treatment facility." It would have been really hard for me. I'm glad I didn't have to do that. He actually got a bus ride. He got a ride with somebody else where I'm out scrambling trying to get him a ride home. He figured out how to get home. And he came home and he did get clean and sober. And so I didn't know how to not enable. So I talked about a relationship I was in for 3 years. So this young man I was with didn't have a car, didn't have a good credit rating, of course. So I'm going to be really kind and rescue and co-sign for a car for him that he bought from his mom. Because then he'll think I'm so kind and I'm so generous, right? And he's got to have a car because if he has a job, he can help pay for his own expenses and it'll build his self-esteem and then he'll quit using, right? So I co-sign for the car. He gets a job. Does he keep the jobs? No, he's an addict. Of course he doesn't. Who keeps paying the bills? I do. Well, he's got to have a car. He's got to get a job. But eventually it gets to the point where I'm paying the car insurance, I'm paying the car bills because I'm so afraid he might kill somebody drinking and driving. And because I co-signed for this car, they could take everything I own. But I still didn't realize, hey, I could take this car, I own half of it, put it in storage, and when he can pay for it, he can have it back. Oh, I thought that that would be so mean. And I didn't want him to look at me as a mean, controlling person. So I kept paying the bills, but just getting even more resentful and mad at myself for doing it and mad at him for not quitting. But I tried so hard to make this relationship so important that he wouldn't put it at risk. He'd quit using, right? But I didn't realize it wasn't about love and care. It was about he was an addict. He had a progressive illness. And when he tried to cut down on smoking pot, he just drank more. So I got super crazy. I remember driving up to school one morning. It's a 20-minute drive. I couldn't have told you anything about that drive. But I'm in the car just yelling at my boyfriend, just letting him have it, telling him everything I want him to hear. And I'm the only one in the car. I felt pretty crazy. He became my drug of choice. Where is he? What is he doing? Who's he with? Is he going to keep this job? You know, all that stuff. Are there drugs in my home? All those things, but I was so afraid. I didn't want to be alone. I'd gone through a lot of grief and loss before I met this person, and I was using this relationship to fill that void for me. And I didn't understand addiction, and I didn't understand codependency. I just knew that if you love somebody, you help them out. That's what I was taught. I was taught that if I make the people happy in my life, then I'll be happy. And I was killing myself trying to do it. And then my therapist told me about Al-Anon. And I started to go to Al-Anon. And they taught me things I didn't know. And there was a time when they taught me to say, I'm glad you got home safely. I'll talk to you tomorrow. So my boyfriend comes home at 2 in the morning. And I said, I'm glad you got home safe. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And he says, well, don't you even want to know where I've been? And I said, I'm glad you got home safe. I'll talk to you tomorrow. It was such a change. I started to change. I didn't get into the quarrel. I didn't give him the excuse to say, you were just going to nag, see, I didn't want to come home anyway. But I stopped enabling after the relationship ended, because when I started going to Al-Anon, I started doing the steps and realized, number one, we are powerless over alcohol and our lives had become unmanageable. My life was unmanageable because I didn't know how to live with an active alcoholic addict. I didn't know how to set boundaries. I didn't know how to deal with my fears and my anger and my emotions until I started work in recovery. So I finally end this relationship, but I paid off the car and gave it to him. Said, please get it put in your name. Is he going to do that? Of course not. It's already registered, taxed, insured. Took him months to get that done. I give him the extra keys. Again, not thinking, oh, I don't want him to be mad at me. I don't want them to think I'm generous and kind. And I had to look at my own codependency. My feelings were based on what somebody else thought about me and what they did. And I wasn't helping. I wasn't helping this young man learn how to be independent and suffer the consequences of his own actions. So, big learning lesson for me. So for most of us, are you afraid that they won't talk to you? Are you afraid that they will go use again? Are you afraid they'll be homeless? what is underneath this enabling? Is it a sense of obligation that you have to do this for the people that you love? Don't join the guilt club. What I see happen is people come to this family program and they learn more about enabling and what is most helpful and what's not. And then you go home and you beat yourself over the head with the guilt club. Please don't do that. I've had to realize, and I believe this for you all as well, you've done the best that you can. Given the circumstances, the information, and the tools you have at the time, you've done the best that you could do. I needed new tools. I needed new information. I needed ways to deal with my own emotions that I could do things differently. I've had to forgive myself for those decisions I made in the past because I really didn't know how to do it differently at the time. But I'm imploring you to know that we have to learn as family members how to do things differently that are much more helpful to our loved ones and don't enable this disease to just go unnoticed and continue, because it's deadly. It's deadly to our relationships and deadly to our lives. So what's the difference between being sober versus being in recovery? Have any of you heard the term dry drunk? So some of your loved ones, as I said, have gone through detox and they get sober. That's what they do in detox. If you're swimming and you want to get dry, what do you have to do? You have to get out of the water. To get sober, you have to quit using. And many people have tried and tried and tried and have not been able to. So they get sober in detox. What we do here at Cirque Lodge is learn how to live a life of recovery through this 12 steps, the 12 traditions, the concepts, the program, the support systems. It's a life of amazing qualities and potential. And many of us family members are so sad about the loss of potentials that we've seen with our loved ones, and we wonder if they'll ever meet their potential. And it's really hard when you're active in addiction. So recovery is a whole different process than just being sober. A dry drunk is somebody who just has quit using, but nothing really gets better in their life. They might still be ornery, communication doesn't get better, finances don't get better, they're just not using. So we believe that the recovery piece is about the quality of life. So what if your loved ones get sober? You still need your own recovery. Codependency is progressive. My codependency hasn't quit. I still want to rescue my kids. They're 43, 41, So I have to really look at my own recovery. And it's not dependent on whether my loved one stays in their recovery or they relapse. In fact, my recovery as a family member prepares me that I can deal with whatever happens in the future, and I don't have to live in fear all the time. If they relapse, I have compassion for that person who gave in to this powerful disease. So that's one of my favorite quotes from a little daily reader called One Day at a Time in Al-Anon. It says, don't be angry at the alcoholic who relapses. Instead, have compassion for the person who gave in to this powerful disease. Well, that was a really different process for me because I just wanted to be angry. That doesn't help. Again, it goes against the healing process of recovery for my loved one. So what I did, I started recovery, I ended that relationship, but what I didn't do was continue in my own recovery. And I didn't deal with my own issues, so I just found other people to rescue and got into other unhealthy relationships because I wasn't living a life of recovery. For many of you out there, if you end this relationship with an alcoholic or an addict, or they get better, if we don't deal with ourselves, we will find someone else to rescue. We will keep our codependency going, and our identity is based on that, and that really has to change. So your recovery is not based on whether your loved one stays in recovery and is sober or not. I know that's hard to grasp, but it's so true. So AA, as Dave talked about, is a spiritual program. Do you have any difficulty with the word God in the 12 steps? We look at it in several ways. G-O-D, a group of drunks. The Big Book says wherever there's two together, you can call that a meeting. The work that the fellows and the women do here in talking to other alcoholics is so crucial when they say, oh, you've done that too? You mean I'm not alone? You felt that way too? And so we take the stigma out of it. And they talk to other people, and that's how AA got started, with two men who really sat down and realized how much they helped each other. And that the reason they were able to do that was with each other, they knew they needed to spread that word to other people. And that's how they stayed sober. But a group of drunks, G-O-D. God, good orderly direction. This disease has been looked at as a spiritual malady for centuries because this disease affects our behaviors. We cross our morals and values where we don't with other diseases. You know, when I had cancer, I wasn't out there stealing from my family, right? So what we look at in recovery with a spiritual base is getting back to our morals and values. Father Leo Booth years ago wrote a little book called Spirituality and Recovery. And he said spirituality is about being true to yourself. Well, this disease, again, impacts our ability to live within our morals and values. And again, there's so much shame and lack of self-esteem and lack of self-respect as the result of the behaviors. This disease manifests itself through behaviors. I don't just grow a big tumor on my cheek and I go, oh, you're an alcoholic, right? This disease manifests itself in behaviors because, again, we're not thinking straight. We're thinking in survival mode. The other thing we look at is the great outdoors. Now, a lot of you talk to your loved ones and they're saying, oh, I had a massage today and we went for a hike and I went on the helicopter, and you're going, I'm home paying the bills and taking care of these kids and you're going for a ride in a helicopter? Well, I'll tell you, the reason we do that is we've seen some amazing spiritual transformations when we get outside. We get up on these beautiful mountains here in Utah, and they land up on the top up there, and we have quite a rock cairn going at this point where residents take a marker and they write on a rock things that they're letting go of or things that they're praying for to come into their lives. And we've seen some amazing spiritual experiences. Your residents often have been very isolated in their addiction, so we get them outside and we get them active again and get them connected to the beautiful nature here and their own morals and values. So I guess there's a question.
Yes. How does the concept of dry drunk fit into the disease model for alcoholism? No questioning that it is a disease, just trying to understand the separation of alcohol from alcoholism in this case.
So did they hear that?
Yep.
Okay, so very good question. I think that a person who just decides to not drink and doesn't need recovery, I don't know that they truly accept that it is a disease that needs treatment. I think that they think that the solution is just to not drink or use. They still have the same disease. But we know through years of experience, in order to keep it in remission and to build a quality of life, the recovery piece is an extremely important component. Now, there are some people who have been able to quit on their own. I'm not going to say that everybody has to have the 12-step program. There are different approaches to recovery. What works for you? Is it a Buddhist philosophy? Meditation, exercise, many things. We're open to whatever can help you build a quality life. But some people just think that not drinking is the solution, and we have found that there is not the happiness, the peace, the restoration of healthy relationships without the recovery piece. I hope that answers the question. If not, please write in again. Anything else there, question-wise? Okay, thanks. So we get them outside and we get them hiking and snowshoeing, and trust me, we know how hard you are working at home and can kind of get a little resentment of they're here doing all this work. But as Brian said, they don't go home at 4 o'clock. They start first thing in the morning and they work all day, every day. So it's important that we get them out and get them back into a spiritual condition. And that's not about religion. It's about being true to yourself, living a life of morals and values. Again, this disease has been looked at as a moral issue for centuries. And yet in 1779, a doctor named Benjamin Rush actually talked about alcoholism as being a disease. But it was back in the 50s that the American Medical Association really started to recognize this as a disease that's chronic, progressive, predictable. Again, I don't believe in excuses. We don't just say, oh, I do that, I'm an alcoholic. What, you should just accept what I do. Because a program of recovery of the 12 steps says, I take a thorough moral inventory, a very searching and fearless moral inventory. And in step 10, we continue to take personal inventory, and when we're wrong, we admit it. In step 8, we write a list of the people that we've harmed. And in step 9, we make direct amends whenever possible, except when to do so would harm them or others. So some of you might be wanting your loved ones to make amends right away, and that's a little ways down the road. I'm sure you've heard sorry so many times it really might not mean much to you anymore. But when we do a thorough amends, we say, I was wrong for what I did. And we take accountability for that. And again, as family members, I had to do that. My codependency with my loved one caused a lot of harm to my other family members, to his family members. And I had to make amends for that. So the recovery piece is about a quality of life and not just not using. So there's the helicopter, a picture of one anyway. But we get them outside, and the smile on their face and getting connected with their body, getting moving again is just so crucial. And for many of you, you have isolated and not gotten out and taken good care of yourself. So please, if you can, do that too in these limited conditions in the world right now. So we talk about the 3 C's of Al-Anon. We cannot control it. We cannot cure it. We did not cause it. You can't control their addiction. Many of us have tried. Did it work? It doesn't work. We can lock them in a closet, and it's not going to work. Even the Big Book tells us that we could send them to up to the Arctic Circle, and some Eskimo would come along with a bottle of whiskey. I mean, we can't control what they do, and it's so much more peaceful when you realize that you can't, because we try so hard. But we've added 2 more C's to this, and one is contribute. What do you want to contribute to this relationship? Do you want to contribute help and not enabling? Do you want to contribute controlling and criticism? Or do you want to contribute compassion, love, and healthy dynamics? Sometimes we contribute a lot of negativity. Like I said, one mom just kept saying every day, I think you're going to relapse, I think you're going to relapse. Finally, after 6 months, this young man thought, she doesn't believe in me, she doesn't think I'm going to stay sober, I might as well go use. That's not what I want to contribute. Okay. Do you want to add guilt or shame to your loved ones? And we've talked about, that's not what I want to contribute. I want to contribute healthy boundaries, honesty, compassion, but I want to contribute healthy boundaries, and I am going to do that. I'm not going to accept unacceptable behavior just because you're an addict or just, So, trust. Our loved ones need to know that they can come to us at difficult times. We can handle it, or do you engage in help assault? So your loved one comes to you and says, I'm really struggling today. I really want to use, I want to drink. What would be your response? Some of you would say, well, do you need to call your sponsor? Should I take you to a meeting? What do you need to do? How can I help? That's not what I want to contribute. I call that help assault. Do you need to read the Big Book? Can I take you someplace? Do you need something to eat? I mean, we just get into our fear, right? So what I want to contribute is confidence to that person that says, I'm sorry you're really having such a tough day. What do you think you need to do? Nobody likes to be told what to do. I'm old and I still don't like to be told what to do. But if I contribute that, I trust that they do know what to do. And I say, what do you think you need to do? They might say, maybe, I probably need to call my sponsor. Maybe I need to get to a meeting. And then I could say, could I help with that in some way? Let me know. Help assault is, what it contributes to them is the thinking that they don't know what to do, that you've got to do it for them. I want to contribute that I have confidence in them, that I know that they can make right decisions. If I take it over for them, I don't allow them to be fully self-supporting and to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. I want to contribute some faith and trust that, hey, I trust you. I know you can work through this. But if you are going to fall apart and go into help assault or criticism, well, you must not really like sobriety. You must not really want sobriety if you're craving. It's not true. Cravings happen. It's part of this disease. They're not going to come to you if you're in a place where you're going to either give criticism or help assault. And we want them to be able to come to us. We're not their sponsor. We don't get to fix it for them, but we do want to be there as a loved one for support. And that's what Al-Anon had to teach me, how to be there as a supportive person, but not come to the rescue. We talk about fear for the codependent is fix everything and ruminate. I couldn't fix this, but I would ruminate about everything that I needed to do to try to fix it, and it'll just drive us crazy. So I'd ask you to look at these 5 C's. Some of you may think that you caused it by not being the very best parent or whatever the circumstances were, but that's not the case. If every child that came out of a ghetto situation, you'd think that everyone comes out as an addict. Well, they don't. Just the same as every child or person who comes out of a very privileged, wonderful childhood isn't going to come out as a non-addict or a non-alcoholic. This is a disease that knows no boundaries. It doesn't have gender preferences. It doesn't matter about religion, race, nothing. It's a disease that can strike anyone, and that's why there's AA in almost every country around the world. And you can walk into a meeting and you can walk into an Al-Anon meeting and automatically connect to those people because they understand the fear, the resentments, the control issues. They understand it all. So please find a meeting that you can connect with. There's many online and through Zoom and other ways. We actually had an in-house meeting here at Cirque Lodge on Wednesday night. We call ourselves the Hair on Fire group because the families have their hair on fire more than the addict. They're just calm and numbed out. But I was the one with my hair on fire. And as Gary has said, and many times that an old mentor of his said, if you start your day with your hair on fire, it usually doesn't get better from there. So I learned not to give help assault because I want to contribute to my loved one, that they can come to me, but I'm not going to take over their problem for them and try to fix it for them, but have confidence in them, that they can put into practice what they're learning here at Cirque Lodge. I want to contribute enabling. Do you? Do you want to help? Do you want to provide encouragement, compassion, and healthy boundaries? So maybe one of your loved ones comes to you and say, hey, I've got this great idea. I really love my roommate. We're going to keep each other sober. How about you pay for a down payment for an apartment, and we'll live together and keep each other sober, and then we won't have to pay for the cost of going to sober living. What do you think? So instead of going off, you just say, no, I can't do that, but what I can do is support you into getting into a sober living. Some of us don't know that no is a complete sentence. So it's like a little kid that comes to you before dinner and says, can I have a cookie? And you say no, but you can have some apple slices. So for me as a parent, if I can say no, but then I can say yes, I feel better, But I had to learn how to say no and really stick to that. How many of you have set boundaries and then given up on them later because alcoholism is great at pushing your boundaries. They'll push, push, push until you finally say, okay, leave me alone. That doesn't work. I need to be consistent. It's like the little kid who has learned that they can come and get in bed with you in the middle of the night. So 30 times you go put them back in their bed because you can't sleep. And at 31 times you finally go, oh, okay, I've just got to get some sleep. So that child learns, hey, if they try hard enough, they'll be able to sleep in your bed with you, and you don't sleep well and wake up tired and cranky. Because this little kid's got to learn they got to sleep in their own bed now that they can crawl out of their crib or they have their own bed. We have to be consistent with those boundaries. And what is it underneath it that you have to set those healthy boundaries that are realistic. They may not respect your boundary, but the boundary is for you and for the health of your relationship. And then you have some decisions to make if those boundaries aren't respected. The Gottman Institute, they've been doing couples counseling for many years, and they've done so much research. It's great stuff. They talk about the 4 horsemen in a relationship, which are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. Many of the residents here are really good at these 4 things. They'll be critical. They'll blame you for their addiction or what you have done or haven't done. They're very good at criticizing themselves as well. Defensiveness. We can get very defensive if we get told we're doing something, well, you do this and you've done that. That's not going to help either. So the solution to that is to be able to listen and understand where your partner or the other person is coming from. Contempt. Now, when we're critical, again, and we show contempt for people and the behaviors that they've done in addiction, one of the things that is very, very harmful to a relationship is if I keep bringing up the past over and over again. Well, you've done this for years, and 5 years ago you did this, and it just shows contempt. And it's not helpful. Can you put the past behind you? It's done. Work on the issues today. Stonewalling. I'm not going to talk about this. And they just leave. Well, there's an appropriate time to take a time out, but in a healthy relationship, you're going to come back to the issue and calmly talk about it. And you may need a mediator to do that. But you just don't just refuse to talk about it. You need to be able to understand each other. These 4 things will tear up a relationship. The criticism, the solution is a gentle startup. Instead of coming to our loved ones with criticism, I can't believe you did that again, what's wrong with you? I could start a much more gentle approach. Again, as we started in the beginning, is how do I approach my loved one? It's like, hey, we need to really talk about what happened yesterday. It's important. Can we sit down and talk about this? So do I do a gentle startup? Do I maybe give a compliment that says, I'm so proud of the work you're doing there at Cirque Lodge, but here's some concerns I have. Let's talk about them. It's a very different approach, and it's contributing in a helpful way the communication in this relationship. Now, you're going to get a lot of these from your loved ones, and you need to set those boundaries and not engage in these with your loved ones. Choice, another C. With recovery now, I have a choice for myself. You have choices on how you live with this disease or how you don't live with this disease. I felt so locked in that this is what you do for your loved ones. I didn't realize I had a choice. Take away the car. Don't rescue. Give them other options. I just really didn't know I had a choice until people taught me how to make different choices. That's why, as loved ones and family members, we need a support system that's been through this, that understand what living with addiction is. Just like AAs get a sponsor, I get an Al-Anon sponsor who guides me through the steps, who works with me when I'm in my fear and my anger and I want to control. Instead of going to my loved one with it, I go to my sponsor. That's the appropriate place to take it. This is not a program as do as I say, not as I do. If you show that you're going to a meeting at least once a week, you're working the steps, you have a sponsor, you're reading the recovery literature. You're that role model that is showing this is what I'm doing to have a quality of life. I can't make you do it, but I'm showing that I'm as invested in this relationship as I can be and taking care of myself, and that's what I want to model for you as well. You can't say, call your sponsor, go do this stuff, when we're not doing it either, because we don't get better either.